They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own blood is the poison? I'm standing in a ballroom surrounded by 300 people, wearing a dress I didn't choose, watching my sister take the microphone at her wedding reception. My 7-year-old son Lucas is beside me, swinging his little legs, completely unaware that in about 30 seconds, his entire understanding of family is about to shatter. See, I thought this was a celebration. Turns out, it was an execution. And the most shocking part? Everyone knew except me. My sister called me unwanted and a used product in front of everyone. My parents covered their mouths, laughing like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. And I couldn't believe this was really happening, that my own family had lied to me, set me up, and turned my humiliation into entertainment. The truth is, this wasn't a spontaneous, cruel moment. This was planned, rehearsed, and designed to destroy me. But what happened next? Nobody, especially not them, saw that coming. Because sometimes karma doesn't wait for you to seek revenge. Sometimes justice walks up to a microphone, exposes everything, and cancels a wedding in real time. Then the real story begins. I stood there in that ballroom, wearing the beige dress they'd picked out for me, watching my sister Vivian glow in her white gown like she always did. There were 300 guests, champagne glasses catching the light, and my son Lucas, just 7 years old, sitting beside me, swinging his little legs under the table. Everything felt wrong from the moment we walked in, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I kept telling myself it was just nerves, just my usual anxiety around my family. Then Vivian took the microphone for her maid of honor speech, and I realized I'd walked straight into a trap. She smiled at the crowd, that perfect smile I'd seen 1,000 times, and started talking about family and unconditional love. I couldn't believe what I was hearing when her tone shifted, when she looked directly at me and called me the unwanted one in front of everyone. The room went silent for a heartbeat, then laughter erupted. My parents front and center, hands over their mouths, shoulders shaking. Vivian kept going, calling me a used product, and I felt Lucas tug on my sleeve, asking why Auntie was being mean. The betrayal wasn't just in her words. It was in every face that smiled, every person who didn't stand up. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never come back up. My face burned with shame, and I could feel 300 pairs of eyes on me, judging, pitching, probably agreeing with her. This was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt like an execution. Lucas was confused, asking questions I didn't know how to answer, and all I could do was hold his hand tighter. The humiliation wasn't just mine. They'd dragged my baby into it, and that's when something inside me cracked. Vivian kept talking, kept twisting the knife, and the worst part was how deliberate it all sounded. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or a joke gone wrong. This was something she'd practiced, something she'd planned to say. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their love, trying to be enough. The truth was hitting me like a freight train. I'd never been family to them. I'd been the punching bag, the scapegoat, the one they kept around just to feel better about themselves. I sat there frozen, my heart pounding so loud I thought everyone could hear it. Lucas was crying now, soft little sniffles that made my chest ache, and I knew I had to get him out of there. But I couldn't move. Not yet. Something told me to wait, to see where this was going, because the way my parents were watching me felt different. They weren't just laughing anymore. They were waiting for something, and I had this sinking feeling that the worst part wasn't over yet. Then I saw him, Vivian's fiancé, standing up from the head table with a look on his face I'd never seen before. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark, and he was walking toward the microphone like a man on a mission. The room shifted, the energy changed, and suddenly I realized that maybe, just maybe, someone was about to do something that nobody expected. This didn't start at that wedding, though. It started the day Vivian was born, and I became invisible. Growing up in Ashford, our house was split down the middle like a war zone. Vivian's side had ballet trophies, designer clothes, and parents who showed up to every recital. My side had hand-me-downs, a part-time job at 15, and a bedroom door that never opened unless I was being told to do something for her. She was the golden child, the princess who could do no wrong, and I was the workhorse who existed to make her life easier. The family betrayal wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, consistent, woven into every single day of my childhood. I remember being 12, winning a scholarship for academic excellence, and my mother barely looked up from Vivian's college brochures. "That's nice, sweetie," she said, not even asking which university had chosen me. But when Vivian got cast in a local theater production, not even a lead role, they threw a dinner party and invited half the neighborhood. I stood in the kitchen that night, washing dishes while everyone toasted to her bright future, and I felt something harden inside me. I couldn't believe how easy it was for them to celebrate her and forget me, like I was furniture, like I didn't matter at all. Every milestone I hit was met with indifference, every achievement dismissed as expected because I was the smart one. But Vivian? She got applause for breathing. When I graduated top of my class from nursing school, my father said, "Well, at least one of you has job security." When Vivian dropped out of art school to find herself, they funded a 6-month trip to Europe. The double standard was so blatant, it would have been funny if it didn't cut so deep. I learned early that love in our family wasn't unconditional. It was transactional, and I'd been born on the wrong side of the deal. I tried everything to earn their approval, volunteering extra shifts, sending money when they needed it, showing up for every family dinner, even when I was exhausted. Nothing worked. Vivian would cancel last minute and they'd laugh it off as she's so spontaneous. I'd arrive 5 minutes late because of a trauma case at the hospital, and I'd get lectures about responsibility and respect. The humiliation wasn't always public. Sometimes it was just the three of them at the dinner table, making inside jokes I wasn't part of, sharing memories from trips I wasn't invited on. By the time I turned 30, I'd stopped expecting things to change. I had Lucas, I had my career, and I thought I'd made peace with being the outsider. But they had a way of pulling me back in, making me hope that maybe this time would be different. Vivian's engagement was supposed to be a fresh start. She'd called me crying, saying she wanted me there, wanted Lucas to be part of her special day. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored every red flag, every warning sign. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly they'd set me up. They knew exactly how to bait me, how to use my hope against me. They lied to me about wanting me there, about this being a family moment. What they really wanted was an audience for their cruelty, a final performance where they could show everyone exactly where I stood in their hierarchy. And I'd walked right into it, holding my son's hand, dressed in the ugly beige dress they'd insisted on, ready to smile through whatever they threw at me. But standing in that ballroom, watching my sister verbally destroy me while my parents laughed, I finally understood something I'd been too scared to admit. This wasn't about me not being good enough. It never had been. This was about them needing someone to look down on, someone to blame, someone to use. And the man walking toward that microphone? He was about to expose every single one of them. The worst part about that wedding wasn't just the public humiliation. It was remembering how alone I'd been when my own marriage fell apart. 4 years ago, I'd married Kevin, thinking I'd finally found someone who saw me, who chose me first. For 6 months, it was everything I'd dreamed of, until I came home early from a double shift and found him in our bed with someone from his office. The infidelity hit me like a punch to the gut, but what came after was worse. I called my mother that night, sobbing, barely able to breathe, and she sighed like I'd interrupted her favorite show. "What did you expect, honey?" she'd said, her voice flat and cold. "Men cheat when they're not satisfied at home. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to him instead of always working." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband cheated on me, and somehow it was my fault. I hung up and called Vivian, desperate for someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, that I deserved better. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Well, you did trap him with a pregnancy pretty fast. Can you blame him for wanting out?" That was the moment I learned that betrayal from family cuts deeper than anything a stranger can do. The divorce was brutal. Kevin fought for nothing because he wanted nothing, not even visitation with Lucas. I was drowning in legal fees, working overtime to keep our tiny apartment, and my family. They were planning Vivian's gallery opening in Manhattan, posting photos of champagne toasts and designer dresses. I asked my father for a small loan, just enough to cover the lawyer, promising to pay him back within 6 months. He said no, told me I'd made my bed, and needed to learn responsibility. 2 weeks later, I saw on Facebook that he'd bought Vivian a car, a brand new SUV, because her old one had too many miles. That year broke something in me that I didn't know could break. I was a single mom, working 70-hour weeks at the hospital, coming home to a 3-year-old who was too young to understand why everything had changed so suddenly. I had no answer that wouldn't hurt him, so I just held him closer and tried to shield him from the chaos. The truth was, they'd written us off the moment I stopped being useful, the moment my life became messy and complicated. They wanted the perfect family photo, and a divorced daughter with a kid didn't fit the frame. I stopped calling after a while, stopped showing up to family dinners where I'd sit at the end of the table like a ghost. The isolation was suffocating, but it was also revealing. I started to see how much energy I'd been spending on people who gave nothing back. My coworkers became my family, the nurses who covered my shifts when Lucas was sick, who brought us dinner when I was too exhausted to cook. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, learning that dignity wasn't something they could give or take away. It was something I had to reclaim for myself. But then Vivian called 6 months ago, voice sweet as honey, saying she was getting married and wanted me there. She said she'd been thinking a lot about our relationship, about how she wanted to do better. I wanted to say no, wanted to protect Lucas and myself from more disappointment. But there was this tiny, pathetic part of me that still hoped that maybe she'd changed, that maybe they all had. So I said yes, bought the plane tickets I couldn't afford, and told myself this time would be different. Standing in that ballroom, listening to her call me unwanted, while my parents doubled over with laughter, I realized hope had been my biggest mistake. They hadn't changed. They'd just gotten better at hiding their vengeance, better at packaging their cruelty as jokes and family dynamics. And now, with 300 witnesses and my son watching his mother get torn apart, they'd finally shown everyone exactly who they were. The man at the microphone, Vivian's fiancé, was staring at my sister like he'd never seen her before. And something in his expression told me the tables were about to turn in a way none of us expected. The signs were there from the beginning, but I'd trained myself not to see them. 2 months before the wedding, Vivian sent me a text with a dress code. Earth tones, nothing flashy, we want you to blend in. I thought it was weird, but I told myself she just had a vision for her aesthetic. Then my mother called, insisting I couldn't bring a +1 because seating is tight, even though Lucas needed someone to help watch him during the ceremony. When I pushed back, she got sharp, said I was making everything about myself as usual. That's when I should have known. This wasn't about seating charts or color schemes. This was about control. The week of the wedding, they had me running errands like I was their personal assistant. Pick up flowers from a vendor an hour away, confirm the cake delivery, call the photographer to change the timeline. Vivian would text me at midnight with new tasks, and when I said I was exhausted from my hospital shifts, she'd guilt me with, "I guess I know where I stand with you." My father even called to say they'd rearranged the seating and put Lucas and me at table 17, in the back corner, practically in the kitchen, where the catering staff kept bumping our chairs. I couldn't believe they'd do that to their own grandson, but I swallowed it, told myself it was just logistics. The morning of the wedding, my mother showed up at my hotel room with the dress, the ugly beige one that washed me out completely. "We need you to wear this," she said, not asked. "Vivian wants the bridal party in jewel tones, and we can't have you clashing in the family photos." I stared at that dress, at the cheap fabric and the shapeless cut, and something in my gut screamed danger. But I put it on anyway, zipped it up, looked at myself in the mirror and saw exactly what they wanted. Invisible, diminished, Erased. Lucas asked why I looked sad, and I lied again, said Mommy was just tired. During the ceremony, I noticed people whispering, glancing back at our table with strange expressions. Vivian's friends kept looking at me, then at each other, smirking like they were in on some joke I hadn't heard yet. My cousin Sarah leaned over during the vows and whispered, "Are you okay? This feels off." I didn't know what she meant, but the shocking realization was starting to creep in. Everyone knew something I didn't. The energy in that room wasn't celebration, it was anticipation, like they were all waiting for a bomb to drop. Then came the reception, and Vivian was practically glowing with something that wasn't just bridal joy. It was excitement, the kind you get before a performance. She kept checking her phone, nodding at my parents, and I saw my father recording on his phone even before the speeches started. That's when it clicked. They were documenting this. Whatever was about to happen, they wanted proof, wanted to capture it, and probably share it later. The backstabbed feeling hit me before she even opened her mouth. This primal sense that I was surrounded by people who wanted to hurt me. When Vivian grabbed the microphone and started her speech, I saw my mother pull out her phone too, angling it toward me. Lucas was playing with his napkin, oblivious, and I wanted to grab him and run. But I was frozen, trapped in that beige dress at table 17, watching my sister's face transform from sweet to cruel in real time. She was looking right at me when she said it, the unwanted one, and the room erupted exactly the way she'd planned. This wasn't a slip, wasn't a joke gone wrong. This was her moment, the performance she'd been building toward, with my son sitting right there watching his mother get ripped apart. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, when the laughter was reaching its peak and my parents were practically crying with joy, Vivian's fiancé stood up. His face was white, his hands were shaking, and he was staring at my sister like she'd just revealed herself to be a complete stranger. The room went quiet so fast you could hear people breathing, and I realized, maybe, just maybe, they'd miscalculated. Maybe not everyone thought this family drama was entertaining. Maybe someone was about to call out the betrayal for exactly what it was. Marcus Chen, Vivian's fiancé, the man she'd been planning her entire future with, walked to that microphone like he was approaching a crime scene. He was a child advocacy lawyer, someone who'd spent his career protecting kids from abuse, and the look on his face told me he'd just witnessed something that violated every principle he stood for. The room was dead silent now, 300 people holding their breath, and Vivian was still smiling, probably thinking he was about to defend her or make some romantic gesture. She had no idea what was coming, and honestly, neither did I. "I need to say something," Marcus started, his voice steady but cold in a way that made my skin prickle. "I've been standing here for the last 5 minutes, watching the woman I thought I knew humiliate her sister in front of everyone, including a 7-year-old child who doesn't understand why his mother is being mocked." The shocking shift in energy was immediate. People started looking at each other, uncomfortable, like they'd just realized they'd been laughing at something terrible. Vivian's smile faltered, and she reached for the microphone, but Marcus pulled it away. "No, you've said enough. Now it's my turn." He turned to face the crowd, and I saw my father start to stand up, probably to shut this down, but Marcus held up his hand. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm a child rights attorney. I've spent 15 years fighting for kids who've been neglected, abused, and scapegoated by their own families. And what I just watched happen here? That's exactly what this is. Family betrayal, systematic emotional abuse, documented and celebrated." He pulled out his phone, held it up so everyone could see he'd been recording. This entire speech, every cruel word, every laugh from her parents, it's all here. And I want everyone in this room to understand what you just participated in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Someone was finally defending me, finally calling out the pattern that had poisoned my entire life. Lucas was looking up at me, confused, but sensing something important was happening, and I squeezed his hand so tight I was afraid I'd hurt him. Marcus kept going, his voice getting stronger, angrier. "This woman," he pointed at me, is an emergency room nurse who saves lives for a living. She's a single mother who's been raising her son alone while her family abandons her, mocks her, and treats her like she's disposable. And you all just sat here and laughed while a child watched his mother get called unwanted and used product. The humiliation I'd felt moments ago was transforming into something else. Validation, vindication, the overwhelming relief of being seen. People were staring at their plates now, at their phones, anywhere but at Vivian or my parents. My mother's face had gone pale, my father was red with rage, and Vivian looked like she'd been slapped. Marcus turned to her, and what he said next made my heart stop. I can't marry someone capable of this level of cruelty. I can't build a life with someone who would traumatize a child for entertainment. This wedding is canceled, effective immediately. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, people pulling out their phones to record the fallout. Vivian lunged for Marcus, grabbing his arm, trying to explain or backtrack or something, but he just stepped away from her like she was contaminated. I saw fragments of messages on your phone last week, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You, your mother, your father, mapping out exactly what you'd say, how you'd destroy her. I thought maybe you'd come to your senses, that you'd never actually go through with something so cruel. But you did it anyway, and you enjoyed it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and said, I'm sorry you've lived with this. No one deserves this. Then he walked out, leaving Vivian standing there in her white dress, her perfect day shattered, finally experiencing a fraction of the payback she'd been dishing out for years. The chaos that followed Marcus's exit was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Vivian was screaming, full-on hysterical, mascara running down her face as she turned to me like I'd orchestrated the whole thing. Are you happy now? She shrieked, pointing at me with a shaking finger. You ruined my wedding. You couldn't stand seeing me happy, so you turned Marcus against me. I just sat there, holding Lucas close, watching her try to rewrite reality in real time. The lies were so automatic, so practiced, that I wondered if she actually believed them, or if this was just pure survival instinct kicking in. My mother was right behind her, rushing over to our table with my father trailing, both of them looking at me like I was the villain in this story. How could you do this to your sister? My mother hissed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. This was her special day, and you had to make it about yourself. Had to cause drama like you always do. I couldn't believe they were trying to flip this, trying to make me responsible for Vivian's cruelty, and Marcus's very reasonable reaction. My father added, You've always been jealous of her, always trying to tear her down. Well, congratulations, you finally succeeded. The gaslighting was so blatant it would have been funny if Lucas wasn't sitting right there, absorbing every toxic word. But something was different this time. I wasn't crumbling, wasn't apologizing, wasn't taking the blame like I'd done my entire life. I stood up slowly, picked up Lucas, and looked at all three of them with a clarity I'd never felt before. I didn't ruin anything, I said, my voice quiet but steady. Vivian did that herself when she decided to humiliate me in front of 300 people. Marcus did what any decent person would do. He called out abuse when he saw it. And you two, I looked at my parents. You enabled this, laughed while your grandson watched his mother get destroyed. That's on you, not me. The room was watching us now, phones out, recording every second of this family implosion. I could see people nodding, could hear whispers of support. And I realized the narrative they were trying to build wasn't going to work this time. Too many witnesses had seen what really happened, had heard Marcus call out what they'd done. Vivian tried to grab my arm, probably to continue the confrontation, but I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said firmly. Don't call me, don't text me, don't pretend this family cares about me or my son. We're done. The self-worth I'd been searching for my entire life wasn't going to come from them. It was going to come from walking away. Lucas was crying now, overwhelmed by the shouting and the chaos. And that was my cue to leave. I turned toward the exit, carrying him, and my mother called after me. If you walk out that door, you're dead to us. I stopped, looked back, and said something I'd been too scared to say for 32 years. I've been dead to you my whole life. I'm just finally accepting it. Then I kept walking, past the staring guests, past the ruined wedding cake, past the life I'd been trying so hard to fit into. Lucas asked me where we were going, and I told him the truth. Somewhere better, baby. Somewhere we're actually wanted. As we reached the lobby, I heard footsteps behind us and tensed, ready for another confrontation. But it was Marcus, tie loosened, looking exhausted but resolute. "Wait," he said, handing me a business card. "I meant what I said in there. No one deserves what they put you through. If you ever need legal help, if they try to harass you or your son, call me. No charge. Consider it karma finally catching up to the right people." I took the card, my hand shaking, and thanked him. He nodded, looked back toward the ballroom where the sound of arguing was still echoing, and said, "You did the right thing," walking away. "Some bridges deserve to burn." I later learned he lost friends over that decision, people who thought he should have handled it privately, but he never regretted it. Then he left, and I stood there in that hotel lobby, holding my son and a stranger's business card, realizing that justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it just looks like freedom. 2 days after the wedding, I was sitting in our small apartment trying to process everything when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Marcus, and attached were screenshots, dozens of them, from a family group chat I'd never even known existed. The messages went back weeks, and reading them felt like watching a conspiracy unfold in real time. "She'll never see it coming," Vivian had written. "Mom, make sure she wears something ugly so she looks even more pathetic in photos." My mother's response: "Already ordered the beige dress. She'll look washed out and miserable." The betrayal was right there in black and white, proof that my humiliation had been workshopped like a script. I scrolled through message after message, each one more damning than the last. My father had suggested putting Lucas and me in the back, so nobody important has to see them, and Vivian had loved that idea, adding laugh-crying emojis. They'd debated the wording of her speech, testing different insults to see which would land best. "Unwanted" was my mother's contribution. She'd written, "That's what she's always been. Might as well say it out loud." I couldn't believe the level of planning, the casual cruelty they'd typed out while probably sitting in their living room drinking wine. This wasn't a family. It was a hate group with shared DNA. The screenshots kept coming, and Marcus had included a note. I saw parts of these messages on Vivian's unlocked phone the morning of the wedding. I thought about confronting her privately, but then I watched her actually do it, watched her enjoy destroying you, and I knew she needed to be exposed publicly. You deserved someone to defend you. I'm sorry it took so long. I sat there on my couch, Lucas asleep in his room, tears streaming down my face as I realized that every doubt I'd ever had about my worth, every time I'd wondered if maybe I was the problem, it had all been by design. They'd systematically destroyed my self-worth because it made them feel powerful, feel superior, feel like they mattered. The final screenshot was from after the wedding, sent just hours earlier. Vivian had written, "She ruined everything. We need to do damage control. Tell everyone she's always been dramatic, that Marcus overreacted, that she twisted a harmless joke." My mother had responded, "Already calling relatives. We'll make her look unstable. No one will believe her version." My father added, "She's always been the problem child. People will understand." They were actively trying to rewrite what happened, to gaslight not just me, but everyone who'd witnessed the meltdown. The difference was, this time they didn't know Marcus had the evidence, had the receipts, had documented their entire plan. I forwarded the screenshots to my phone and saved them in 3 different places: cloud storage, external drive, printed copies in a folder. This was my insurance policy, my proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't dramatic, wasn't the villain they'd spent 32 years painting me to be. Then I did something I'd never had the courage to do before. I blocked all 3 of them on every platform: phone, email, social media, everything. No explanation, no final confrontation, no chance for them to manipulate or guilt me back into their toxic orbit. Reclaiming my dignity meant accepting that some people don't deserve access to you, even if they share your blood. Lucas woke up asking about Grandma and Grandpa, and I knew I had to tell him something that wouldn't traumatize him, but wouldn't be a lie either. Sometimes people aren't good for us, baby, I said carefully. Even family. And when that happens, the bravest thing we can do is choose to be somewhere safer. He thought about that, then asked if we were safe now. I looked around our tiny apartment, at the life we'd built together despite everything, and realized the answer was yes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, wasn't bracing for the next attack. I'd cut off the source of the poison, and now all that was left was healing. The next morning, I received one final message before the block went into full effect. My mother, attempting damage control. We need to talk about what happened. You're being irrational. Family works through problems. They don't abandon each other. I stared at those words, at the audacity of someone who'd orchestrated my public destruction now lecturing me about abandonment. And I laughed. Actually laughed. Then I deleted the message without responding, because the truth was simple. Some people don't deserve payback or revenge or even an explanation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just walk away and let them wonder why you stopped fighting for their scraps. The silence I chose wasn't weakness. It was vengeance in its purest form, because nothing would hurt them more than being irrelevant to my story. Within 48 hours, the video started circulating, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. Someone from the reception had posted a short clip of Marcus's speech, tagged his law firm for context, and everything exploded from there. Guests who'd been at the wedding began sharing what they'd witnessed, posting about the calculated cruelty they'd seen. And suddenly my family's carefully curated reputation was unraveling in real time. My cousin Sarah called me, almost breathless, saying, "It's everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. People are calling Vivian out, saying your parents enabled abuse. The comments are brutal. I hadn't asked for this, hadn't posted anything myself, but the truth has a way of spreading when enough people witness it. The shocking part was how many relatives reached out to apologize, admitting they'd always noticed the favoritism but never said anything. My Aunt Linda, my father's sister, sent me a long message explaining that she'd confronted my parents years ago about their treatment of me and had been cut off for interfering. She'd watched from the sidelines as they destroyed my confidence, always hoping I'd eventually stand up for myself. What happened at that wedding needed to happen, she wrote. They needed to be exposed. I'm just sorry it took 32 years and a stranger to do what family should have done all along. The validation was overwhelming, but it also made me angry. How many people had seen the abuse and stayed silent? How many had prioritized keeping the peace over protecting me? Vivian tried to control the narrative, posting a long Instagram statement about family misunderstandings and jokes taken out of context. But the comment section tore her apart. People posted screenshots from Marcus's recording, quoted her exact words, called out the premeditated cruelty. Someone even found my mother's Facebook post from the day before the wedding, a photo of the three of them with a caption about perfect family moments, and the contrast was damning. My father attempted damage control by claiming Marcus had manipulated the situation, but when someone asked why they'd laughed during the speech, he had no answer. The backstabbed feeling they must have experienced, realizing their own guests had turned on them, was exactly the karma they'd earned. The professional consequences hit harder than the social ones. My mother worked in event planning, ran a small business coordinating weddings and parties, and within a week, she'd lost 3 major clients. People didn't want someone who'd orchestrate public humiliation planning their celebrations. My father's corporate job wasn't directly affected, but his colleagues had seen the videos, and suddenly he was known as that guy who laughed at his own daughter. Vivian's art career, already struggling, completely stalled when galleries started distancing themselves from the wedding drama artist. I watched all of this unfold from behind my blocked accounts, getting updates from relatives who thought I'd want to know, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a profound emptiness where anger used to live. Marcus's law firm released a statement supporting his decision to cancel the wedding, framing it as consistent with his lifelong commitment to protecting children from emotional harm. The legal community rallied behind him, praising his integrity, and suddenly he was getting interview requests from podcasts and news outlets about standing up to family abuse. He declined most of them, but he did one interview where he said something that went viral. "We normalize cruelty when we call it family dynamics." What I witnessed wasn't a joke. It was calculated abuse with a 7-year-old witness. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was the only ethical choice. That quote got shared thousands of times, and each share felt like another nail in my family's carefully constructed coffin of lies. The fallout continued for weeks. Distant relatives choosing sides, old family friends reaching out to apologize for not seeing it sooner, people I hadn't spoken to in years sending messages of support. My phone was blowing up with notifications from accounts I'd blocked, desperately trying to reach me through mutual contacts. My mother apparently showed up at my Aunt Linda's house, crying, begging her to fix this and get me to call off the attacks. Linda told her there were no attacks, just consequences, just people finally seeing what had always been there. "You built this prison brick by brick," Linda had said. "Don't blame her for walking free." The most poetic part of the justice was watching them try to use the same tactics on me that they'd perfected over decades. Guilt, manipulation, playing the victim, and realizing none of it worked anymore. I wasn't the scared little girl desperate for their approval, wasn't the exhausted single mom too tired to fight back. I was free, truly free, and they were finally experiencing what it felt like to be unwanted, to be mocked, to be shamed in front of everyone who mattered. I didn't have to do anything. Their own actions, their own words, their own documented cruelty had done all the work. And as I watched their world crumble while mine slowly started to rebuild, I understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. It's just stepping aside and letting people reap what they've sown. 6 months after the wedding, I started therapy. Real, consistent therapy with someone who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. Dr. Patterson was the first person who looked at my story and didn't minimize it, didn't suggest I try to understand their perspective or give them another chance. She called it what it was: systematic scapegoating, emotional neglect, and calculated cruelty. Sitting in her office every Tuesday evening, I started unpacking 32 years of conditioning, all the ways I'd been taught that my worth was negotiable, that love had to be earned through suffering. The healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong and clear. Other days I wanted to call them and beg them to explain why I'd never been enough. But slowly, week by week, I was reclaiming pieces of myself I didn't even know I'd lost. Work became a refuge in unexpected ways. 3 months post-wedding, my supervisor called me into her office, and I braced for bad news. Maybe the drama had affected my reputation. Maybe someone had complained. Instead, she offered me a promotion to senior charge nurse, saying I'd demonstrated exceptional resilience and leadership under pressure. The shocking recognition made me cry right there in her office, because I'd spent so long believing I was fundamentally flawed, incapable of success. My co-workers threw me a small celebration, and one of them, Maria, who'd become a close friend, pulled me aside and said, "You know what's different about you lately? You stopped apologizing for existing. It's like you finally believe you deserve to be here." She was right. I did. Lucas was thriving too, in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant anxiety of family events, without watching me shrink around my parents, he'd become more confident, more expressive. His teacher mentioned he'd started participating more in class, making friends easier, laughing louder. One afternoon, he came home from school with an art project, a family tree assignment, and I tensed, waiting for questions about grandparents and aunts. But when he showed it to me, the tree only had 2 branches. One labeled Mommy with a heart, one labeled Me with a star. "Is this okay?" he asked nervously. "Other kids have big families, but I just wanted to draw us." I pulled him into the tightest hug, fighting back tears, and told him it was perfect. That family isn't about how many people are on the tree. It's about who actually shows up to water the roots. The attempts at contact never fully stopped, but they evolved. My mother sent cards on holidays, always signed "Love Mom," like nothing had happened, like we were just in a temporary disagreement. Vivian created fake social media accounts to check on me, leaving breadcrumb trails I'd find weeks later. My father tried the emergency tactic once, having a relative call saying he was in the hospital. He wasn't. It was just manipulation. Each attempt was a test, a hook trying to pull me back into the cycle, but I'd learned something crucial in therapy. Engaging with abuse, even to defend yourself, still gives abusers power. So I didn't respond, didn't acknowledge, didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they could still affect me. The dignity I'd found in silence was worth more than any confrontation could ever be. The strangest gift came from Marcus, about 8 months after everything imploded. He sent a package, no return address, just a note that said, "Thought you and Lucas might like these." Inside were 2 framed photos, one of Lucas and me at the wedding, before everything fell apart, looking happy and hopeful. The other was Marcus's recording setup from that day, with a caption he'd written, "Evidence that truth always surfaces, even when buried under years of lies." There was also a children's book about a little bird who learns that sometimes the nest you're born in isn't where you're meant to stay, that flying away isn't abandonment, it's survival. I read it to Lucas that night, and he asked if we were like the bird. I said yes, we were, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is build a new nest somewhere safer, somewhere you're actually wanted. A year after the wedding, I was folding laundry when Lucas asked me if I was happy. The question caught me off guard. Kids have this way of cutting through everything to the core truth. I thought about it, really thought about it, and realized the answer was yes. Not the loud, celebratory happiness people post about on social media, but something quieter, steadier. The happiness of waking up without dread, of not constantly bracing for the next attack, of building a life where my son wouldn't learn that love means suffering. "Yeah, baby," I told him. "I really am." He smiled, went back to his coloring book, and I stood there in our tiny apartment, surrounded by mismatched furniture and hospital scrubs drying on the rack, and felt something I'd never felt growing up. Peace. The vengeance I'd once craved had transformed into something better. Indifference. They were no longer villains in my story. They were just people I used to know. People who'd taught me exactly who I didn't want to be. And that, I realized, was the truest form of justice, not making them pay but simply refusing to let them matter anymore. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your own family? Have you spent years wondering if maybe you were the problem, only to realize the problem was never you at all? Drop a comment below and tell me your story, because I know I'm not alone in this. Did cutting off toxic family members make you feel guilty, or did it finally set you free? And here's the real question. Do you think walking away without revenge is weakness, or is it actually the strongest move you can make? I want to hear your perspective. Whether you chose confrontation or silence, whether you got your justice or you're still waiting for karma to do its thing. Share your truth in the comments, tell me what boundaries you've had to set, and let's create a space where people can finally admit that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen or understood or just less alone in your own struggle, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because I'm going to keep sharing these raw, real stories about betrayal, dignity, and reclaiming your worth, the kind of insights that nobody talks about at family dinners, but everyone needs to hear. This community is built on truth, not politeness, and I want you here for every single story. So subscribe, comment, and let's keep this conversation going. Your voice matters here, even if it didn't matter where you came from.